Talk Politics.
We turn now to the congressional races on the ballot for this primary election. Robert Gehrke with the Salt Lake Tribune still with us for that conversation. Thanks for staying with us, Robert. Let's get right into those races. Every member of the delegation up for re-election locked in a primary. Not unheard of, but not usual as well. Are you surprised to see so many challengers coming out this election cycle?
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to draw clear conclusions about why that is, because in some instances, in the case of Senator Mike Lee, for example, you have two more moderate candidates or two sort of anti-Lee candidates challenging him. Whereas, you know, on the other end of the spectrum, in Blake Moore's race, you have more conservative candidates running against him. Or in John Curtis's case, you've got Chris Herrod running against him. So it's hard to say that it's like a right-wing pushback against the establishment, or a moderate pushback against the party's conservative wing. It just feels like there's some discontent on both sides of the spectrum. And I think because of the signature gathering path to the ballot now, it's easier for candidates to get through the convention or go around the convention and get to the primary ballot.
Yeah, I think you make a good point there. Disconcerted on both sides, and people looking emboldened this election season to try to take on incumbents. Let's go through each one of the races real quick. At the top of the list is the race for Senate. Yeah. Senator Lee locked in a primary against Becky Edwards and Ali Isom. What are you seeing in this race?
Well, I think people were watching this one pretty closely when it started, because both of the two women running against him are legitimate candidates with good credentials. But everybody knew it was going to be hard for either of them to succeed in giving Mike Lee a good run if they were both in the race. And there was a lot of talk a couple months ago, going into the convention and after the convention, that one of them should drop out. I know Ali called for Becky to drop out and vice versa, and they both stayed in. So now they're going to be splitting that sort of anti-Mike Lee vote. It's going to be really hard for either of them to come close. It's really been hard for them to raise money, because everybody recognizes the challenge that they're up against in trying to defeat an incumbent. So I think Senator Lee is going to win this primary pretty easily, probably in the neighborhood of 60 to 65% of the vote. And then that moves him forward to the race against Evan McMullin. What I'm watching for on election night is what his percentage is, because if 35%, if 40% don't vote for Mike Lee, those are the people that Evan McMullin's going to be targeting. And as we know from the recent polling by the Hinckley Institute, McMullin is down by 4, which is practically within the margin of error in a head-to-head against Lee.
And we're seeing a strategy from both those campaigns clearly coming out already. And Senator Lee's is to paint Evan McMullin as the Democratic nominee and a liberal. Yeah. So you talk about those potential 35%. How likely are they to go out of the party to a candidate like Evan McMullin?
I think those that are voting for Becky Edwards are largely going to swing over to Evan McMullin. The ones that are voting for Ali Isom are probably going to split in some way, some of them going back to Lee and staying in the Republican Party, some of them going over to McMullin. But it's important, because the whole strategy for McMullin is he's got to get a significant chunk of Republicans, and then the overwhelming majority of the independents, and practically all of the Democrats. And so so that's the math he's up against. And so the first piece of that we're going to get a little better picture of by once we know what percentage of the Republican vote Mike Lee has locked up.
I also wonder how energized Democrats will be for that election, especially the 43% represented at convention who were really passionate against this move to back Evan McMullin.
Yeah, it was a completely unprecedented move, but I think it was the right one, because I think, again, as we're seeing in this race with Ali Isom and Becky Edwards in it, if we had Cale Weston and Evan McMullin running against Mike Lee, there's just there's not enough oxygen in the room for either of them to make a viable run. So I think it was the right move. I think that wanting to beat somebody is a powerful motivator, and so I think the Democrats might come out and vote for Evan, just if for no other reason than because he does actually have a chance of beating Mike Lee or giving him a good run.
Yeah, that's what the polls are showing us at this point. Let's move to the 1st Congressional District. Blake Moore finishing up his freshman term, going for a second. How do you assess this race?
Yeah, I mean, Blake Moore, the first run after your first term, your freshman re-election cycle is always your most vulnerable, and Blake has been, beat up by the right a little bit, as being seen as too moderate for that district. And so that's where these two candidates are coming from, Tina Cannon and Andrew Badger, both making a real hard right-wing push against him. I think Blake is going to be okay in this one. I think that, you know, it's always hard to beat an incumbent just because you're, you know, they're better known, they can raise more money, and so I think Blake is going to come out of this one. But and again, the same dynamic where you have two people splitting the vote, and it makes it a lot easier for the incumbent to push through.
Right. Utah's 2nd Congressional District, Representative Chris Stewart going for a 2nd term against Aaron Ryder. And this is kind of the reverse of the dynamic you talk about in the 1st district.
Exactly, a somewhat more moderate candidate who thinks that the incumbent hasn't you know, lived up to the promises he's made. Aaron Ryder came out of the gate strong. She raised a lot of money, outraised Congressman Stewart in the 1st quarter she was in the race. I think that it was sort of, there was a lot of energy there. I think Congressman Stewart, again, the advantages of incumbency are coming through. He's probably going to win this by a decent margin. And so again, you know, we see these challenges being mounted to incumbents, but that power of incumbency is hard to overcome.
Yes, definitely. Stop me if you've heard this before. In Utah's 3rd Congressional District, we have Representative Chris Stewart against former state Representative Christopher Herod.
Yeah, this is it's deja vu all over again, right? This is the 3rd time these two have faced off. The first time was in the special election immediately after Jason Chaffetz retired, and when they face off, the first time Chris Herod came out of the convention ahead. John Curtis beat him in the primary, right, because he gathered signatures. This time, John Curtis made the decision not to gather signatures, survived through a primary, or survived through the convention despite having a couple challengers. But, you know, was this going to be the chance for Chris Herod to come through? It's not looking that way. It's again, hard for an incumbent. But I also think that, you know, this is a race where people now know these two candidates. They've made up their minds on them. And so I think it's probably a John Curtis winning fairly easily.
Yeah, a lot of people thought it was a mistake for Curtis not to collect signatures. I wonder if he'll do that again in the future after this.
Yeah, I don't think he makes that mistake again. I think he was trying to save some money, but man, if he had lost that in convention and been out of Congress, that would have been a huge upset.
Yep, I think that's safe to say for sure. All right, pretty fascinating what's happening in the 4th district. Again, we have a freshman representative finishing up his 1st term in Burgess Owens against Jake Hunsaker. Owens has not been around when it comes to debates. He wouldn't even do the GOP sanctioned and sponsored debate. How might that impact this race?
Yeah, I'm not sure anybody's seen Congressman Owens for a while. It's kind of unusual, I think, that at least candidates, you know, go through the motions and show up for at least one debate. Congressman Owens has chosen not to do that. He's chosen not to acknowledge that he's even in a campaign. And again, it sort of points to the advantages of incumbency, because Jake Hunsaker's been working pretty hard. He's been showing up at these candidate forums, at these debates, and it's hard to make a dent if the other candidate's just going to spend some money and not acknowledge that you're even in the race. You know, it's hard to knock off a candidate, and this is this is a more conservative district this time through than it was when Congressman Owens beat Ben McAdams. So I think that works to his advantage, and probably it will be enough to carry him through.
At Senator Hatch's funeral, I saw Congressman Owens. I asked him to share some of his thoughts on Senator Hatch, and he wouldn't even do that. Yeah, that would have been the easiest interview, and he didn't even want to do that. Yeah, so it kind of gives you an idea of where he's at with the media and getting out in front of a camera and whatnot.
Yeah, he'll show up on conservative podcasts, sometimes conservative TV programs, but he's very much speaking to his specific base. And in this district right now, I think that base is enough to carry him through to re-election.
All right, it's going to be fun to watch on election night. We really appreciate your insight. And of course, one other point I want to bring up is these primaries are very significant because in all of these cases, with the exception of potentially the Senate, the person that wins this race is going to be a huge favorite in November. So appreciate your time. Thanks so much for being here.
Happy to do it. Thanks.
We'll have more Inside Utah Politics right after the break. Stay with us.